Hello, everyone. Welcome to our lunch break with Achieve Twin Cities. I'm Danielle Grant, and I have the absolute honor of being the president and CEO of Achieve Twin Cities. We are a career and college readiness organization providing services to 18,000 young people a year through paid summer internships with the Step Up Summer Employment Program with our partners, the City of Minneapolis, as well as providing individualized student-facing services in Minneapolis and St. Paul public schools to help our students navigate all of their options and figure out what's next for them post-high school. So today we are going to be diving on in about the Better FAFSA rollout and hopefully answering a lot of questions that you may have. I'm really grateful for everyone who's joining us today. Hopefully we can answer some of your questions. There'll be a lot of information, so please do remember to ask any questions you may have. They're in the Q&A, and also there's a chat function available. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to get us started to my colleague, Caitlyn Cole, who is our Director of Career and College Readiness. So Caitlyn, take it away.
Thank you, Danielle, for the introduction, and huge thanks to all of our audience members for joining us this afternoon. I think it's probably afternoon for everyone, depending on if you're joining us from the Midwest or not. As I was reflecting about this webinar today, something that I really appreciate is the mix of people that are joining us, both from the audience. We've got parents in the crowd, we have colleagues, we have college access professionals, higher ed professionals, and then our panel today is also a mix of different people who have found themselves interacting with the FAFSA in a variety of ways. And that to me feels really representative of Achieve Twin Cities' approach to career and college readiness support. It can't be done in isolation. Partnership is a key aspect of our program model, and we know that students need and deserve wraparound support, which is what I hope you hear today by having these panelists with us who have helped us in a lot of ways in our school buildings with students this year. And then I hope you as the audience hear this multiple times today, but truly thank you for joining us because this is a community effort to help students navigate all of the different steps to achieving their post-secondary goals. So with that, I'd like to tell you just a little bit about my professional background, what brought me to Achieve and my connection to FAFSA, in case you're curious. So I was the first in my family to graduate with a college degree. And when I was making that decision of where to go to college, I made that decision with pretty limited info. I might have made a different decision today, though I did really value the 4 years that I did have at my institution. But what was really apparent to me was that I didn't know what my end goal was. It was a lot of get to college, but then what? And so I was really lucky to enter college access and readiness work after college by accident. That's another story for a different time. But I ended up spending a lot of my early career doing college access readiness work, and then found myself coming to Achieve over almost 4.5 years ago now, because of the focus on readiness for all post-secondary pathways, so college and non-college options. And I remember when I did the FAFSA, I was sitting at my kitchen table with my dad, and we did the FAFSA on paper, and it was really scary. Neither of us really knew what we were doing. And now as I reflect as an adult on that experience, I think about, like, hopefully some of you giggle at this, when you go to the DMV and you're like filling out all the forms and you're putting the boxes together and you're kind of stressed. It's a kind of a weird environment. And then you get up to the window and you're like, I did it. And then they're like, you actually like missed this form and that form. That's kind of what it felt like to do the FAFSA at that time. And so even though it's come a long ways, some of those feelings that our students experience of that anxiousness are still really prevalent. And so I've been really lucky to see the FAFSA evolve over the 12 years that I've been in this field. I've been able to help a lot of students with their FAFSAs, and I also have an incredible staff who continue to work with professionals like Mainhia and Megan, who you'll get to meet today, to successfully complete their FAFSA. So at Achieve, we've been anticipating and preparing for the better FAFSA, as you'll hear it called, or the simplified FAFSA, for about a year so that our team of coordinators could be equipped to support both our Minneapolis Public School and St. Paul Public School seniors, a majority of whom do intend to go to college after they graduate. By the end of the school year, our team will have supported hundreds of students in submitting their FAFSA or their Minnesota DREAM Act. A quick note on that, although we'll be focusing on the FAFSA today, we do want to remind everyone that the Minnesota DREAM Act is open and available for students who are not eligible for federal financial aid. You can visit Minnesota Office of Higher Education's website to learn more about that, and we're going to have that linked for you at the end of our lunch break today. I also would not be able to get through this webinar without thanking my colleagues, Amanda and Zoe. They're our program strategy managers who attended FAFSA training in Washington, D.C. last summer, and they continue to collaborate with colleagues like Megan and Mainhia to support our team and support students in our districts. So I know you're eager to hear from the panelists, so one more quick reminder for all of you to use the Q&A function and the chat function today. Amanda and Zoe, my colleagues, are going to help monitor that space, so we will be able to address some of your questions in real time, but we will also have space at the end of our few formal intro questions where we'll get to answer some of your questions. And we'll make sure to leave you with contact information as well when we wrap up today. So I wish that I had someone like an Achieve coordinator or these other awesome financial aid professionals when I was making my college decision, sitting at my kitchen table, trying to figure out what I could afford. I needed someone to help me navigate the complexity and the jargon. And so I'm really eager for you all to hear from these awesome folks today. So with that, I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then I will welcome them with our first questions. So today with us, we have Meghan Flores. Meghan is the manager of state financial aid programs at the Minnesota Office of Higher Education. Also joining us today is Hana Sato. She is one of our career and college readiness coordinators at Washburn High School, which is a Minneapolis public school, and she is one of our Achieve Twin Cities colleagues. Hi. And then we also have Mainhia Thao, who's the Associate Director of Admissions and Financial Aid at St. Catherine University in St. Paul, Minnesota. And so welcome to the three of you, and thank you a million times over for joining us today over this lunch break. You're going to get to tell us a little bit about how you're even finding yourselves in this space with us today in just a second. But for all of you, I think we'll start with Hana. I'm going to put you on the spot and have you share first, and then turn to Mainhia and Meghan. But if you could tell us a little bit about your work and how that eventually ties with your experience with financial aid and the FAFSA.
Awesome. Thank you, Caitlin. Hi, everyone. My name is Hana Sato. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am the career and college coordinator at Washburn High School in Minneapolis through Achieve Twin Cities. And so my work is at Washburn every single day, kind of keeping the College and Career Center up and running, and that can mean a lot of different things. So that can be meeting with students individually about plans, maybe a ninth grader trying to find a job, maybe a junior talking about standardized testing, maybe a senior talking about college plans or a gap year or military, studying abroad, that sort of stuff. So it really, truly can be a catch bag of whatever is happening in the center at that time. But we do a lot of financial aid applications. We do a lot of FAFSAs. And so my experience with the FAFSA is I was a first generation college student, first one in my family to go to college. And I came from a single parent household. My mom would say this, she would agree. She was completely clueless when it came to me applying to college and doing the FAFSA. And so she actually, as much as it pains me to say, she hired someone to do the FAFSA. And I only wish that she was aware of the college and career coordinators at my high school, because she could have gotten all of that help and support for free. And so I think that's what really drives me in my work in trying to provide that access to everyone for free, so they are able to do whatever they would like to do post high school. But I've been in the college access world for about 9 years now, 3 of them being at Washburn in the CCC. And so I'm really excited to be here, and I'll pass it on to the next person.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mainhia Thao. I currently serve as an Associate Director of Admission and Financial Aid in the College for Women at St. Catherine University. I've been here for about 3 years now. A good chunk of my work is educating and recruiting students to our university and helping them through the admission process, as well as the FAFSA process. And then the rest of my time, I do usually spend time reviewing FAFSAs and packaging financial aid offers for first-year students and transfer students. I've also assisted at FAFSA nights with high schools, and I also train my admissions team in financial aid as well. And I'm also a first-gen student, so happy to be here.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Meghan Flores, and I currently serve as the manager of state financial aid for the Office of Higher Education for Minnesota. So I manage and oversee our 17 state financial aid programs. And most of my work currently is in the policy kind of realm, as well as legislative realm, where I'm working with our House and Senate elected officials related to lawmaking and how it impacts federal and state student aid. But prior to that, I started out working in financial aid, like many of the other folks, struggling with the FAFSA. It's not an uncommon phenomenon. I also came from a single parent household, tried to navigate how to do it, got very confused. I was waitressing overnights and worked in an assembly line, and I thought that it worked by, like, I would just show my numbers and they would show their numbers and we'd meet in the middle, like buying a car or something. Turns out you don't negotiate your package like that, but I did get offered a work study job. So I started working in the financial aid office as a work study student. My undergrad was in social work and Spanish. So I worked a lot with translating and I worked a lot with navigating systems. And I pretty quickly figured out, oh, this is just another language. You have to figure out how to navigate this weird FAFSA world in order to get your end benefit, which was a lot of what I was doing in my social work practicum. So kind of quickly saw some of the connections of individual experiences for students and families and how they tied to a system trying to deliver $8. So I stayed in the higher ed space working on college campuses with federal, state, and college and university-based financial aid for about 15 years, and then moved over to the Office of Higher Ed. I've been here for about 8 years now. I'm happy to be here today and help answer any questions.
Awesome. Thank you again to the three of you for joining us. And audience, I hope what you hear is a little bit of normalization, that it's okay if you're maybe going through this process yourself or with your student and feeling overwhelmed. We've all been there, and hopefully you'll feel a little bit less of that by the end of today. So Meghan, we've asked you to, in your extensive knowledge, kind of take on the task of giving us an overview of how we got here today. I think a lot of our audience members have kind of always been familiar with the FAFSA, but this year especially, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's delayed. It's this. It's better. So tell us a little bit about how we got here.
Thank you. Yes. So it's weird that I ever get asked about what I do professionally in my personal life, because not most people are really talking about the FAFSA on a normal year, right? I want to start out by saying it's been a long time coming, and once we get on the other side of it, it will be very good. This all kind of started back in 2019 with the Future Act, which was a congressional act, which basically said, IRS, you're a department of the federal government. Federal student aid, you're a department of the federal government. You two should share your data in a secure way so that people who are looking for assistance paying for higher education don't have to do quite so much work. So that began the data sharing agreement, where the Internal Revenue System and the federal student aid would share data securely. It took a long time to build out that framework. Then a year later in 2020, Congress passed the FAFSA Simplification Act. So these two acts were very tied together. The FAFSA Simplification Act kind of went a step further than the Future Act and really made significant changes to the form itself and to Pell eligibility. And the goal was to make the FAFSA easier to complete and to expand who gets federal Pell grants. And so that was kind of the goals of those. Because they were very large changes, it took many years for implementation. And so the Department of Ed used what's called a phased implementation. So some of these changes we started to see in the 21-22 academic year. This coming year, 24-25, is when we will see the full completion of these changes really take effect. And really what these changes did is they reduced the number of questions on the FAFSA. They eliminated questions related to previous drug expense. They eliminated the requirement to register for selective service. They replaced what's called the expected family contribution, which is basically just the way to equitably measure everyone the same, do the math the same, and then what is that output number that says this is relatively what we think can be used to measure a family's ability to pay for college. That became the student aid index, and now goes into a negative number. Before it would only be, the lowest would be 0. Another huge change to these acts was making the Pell Grant again eligible or available to incarcerated students. Since 1996, there had been a ban on Pell for incarcerated individuals. The FAFSA Simplification Act removed that ban, so now incarcerated individuals can receive Pell Grants. It also restored Pell Grant eligibility for students who had maybe gone to a school that had some fraudulent activity related to marketing practices, or maybe abruptly closed so the student couldn't finish their program. The other two big changes are related to the number and household. And so no longer looking at that a little bit different. And really that's related to how to make that automated connection of data from the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, work on the FAFSA side, and really more closely looking at household size, the way that the tax system does. And then the last kind of change I'll point out is really impacting divorced parents. So in the past, it was you reported the income and assets for the parent who the student lived with the most. And it now is the parent that provides the majority of financial support. So those are kind of in a bigger, broader terms where we're at with what's happened, what it brought us to where we're at today.
Thank you so much for that overview. A lot of changes, And I think about a couple of years from now, how for many people, this will feel like how the FAFSA has always been, which I think is an important perspective to keep in mind. Megan, if you're also willing to speak to a little bit for folks who maybe aren't as familiar with what the timeline had typically been and why it is a little bit different this year, could you just speak briefly to why things feel so and are so pushed back this year?
Yeah, I can definitely do that. Thank you. So on a normal year, the FAFSA would typically become available October 1st. In law, federal student aid did not have to produce it until January 1st. And so this year, because there were so many changes to the back-end system for federal student aid, they had to completely rebuild the database that holds the FAFSAs, as well as the database that processes them and sends them out. So it was quite a bit of work to build that out. And so the FAFSA didn't become available until December 31st, I'm going to call it, maybe December 30th, depending on when you noticed. So it was quite a bit later, right? We lost the month of October, November, and December. So 3 months delayed. Typically in, again, a normal year, that FAFSA, once it got processed or the student applied in October or whenever they applied, within 3 to 5 days, the information would then be sent to both the state higher education agency, the student in a version for them to see, and then to the schools. And that, like I said, would start happening in October. Because the FAFSA didn't open until December 31st, ICERs did not start flowing. And in fact, because of this phased implementation and the technology that needed to be built out, we just received our very first ICERs for the state of Minnesota this week. So rather than kind of starting to get those ICERs queued up, or excuse me, the FAFSA queued up for state agencies and schools to be able to do financial aid packaging in October, we're just now in March starting to get those. Nationally, there's about 5 million FAFSAs in the queue to be sent out to all the colleges across the country. This week, they did share it'll take about 2 weeks for them to get through that backlog to start slowly getting those out to students as well as their schools. And then within about 3 weeks, we should be on more of a normal, where as soon as a FAFSA is filed, fairly quickly after that, the student will get their version or copy. And then the college or university will also get their version or copy. And I apologize for the slip into financial aid lingo. The ICER is the version of the FAFSA that we at a state agency or that a school gets, but public facing, it's the FAFSA. So sorry about that.
That's okay. I think the exposure to jargon is part of this, right? Just like helping folks navigate that. So, and I saw Hana jotting some notes down with that information that you just shared. So I'm sure she's eager to share that with folks who've been eagerly awaiting to hear what's next. So, and speaking of Hana, if you want to kick off this next question, you've done some FAFSAs at this point, at least a couple. And so when you think about this year compared to previous FAFSA versions that you've seen, from your lens, what do you think have been the biggest improvements and what have been the biggest challenges?
Yeah, I would definitely say like the biggest improvements, like when this better FAFSA works as it should, it goes so much faster. Students are able to put in their information quicker. They don't have to import any tax documentation because it's in theory getting pulled if they worked in the year 2022. Parents are able to log in very seamlessly. They don't have to be looking at a 1040 and plugging in those numbers as you had to do previously for the FAFSA. And so it does go so much faster. And I have also not had to explain what the selective service is to students as well, because that's not a question that is on the FAFSA anymore. So that's, it's just fun to be able to do a quick FAFSA for the students and the families where it like the better FAFSA is working very seamlessly for them. And I guess I would say some of the challenges have been when, you know, it's not working as it should be. And it's primarily for those students and families where the parents maybe don't have a social security number. And so the students are able to complete their side of the FAFSA because they do have that identification, but we are coming across just a lot of challenges and roadblocks for parents who do not have that documentation. And so it's been a lot of Googling. It's been a lot of looking at FAFSA has a really great resource with all of the different like glitches and tech errors and how to do those workarounds. That has been really helpful. So I guess I would even say that's an improvement too. Just a lot of communication on the FAFSA end of things. But it has been a real big challenge to make sure that those students are able to have access to the FAFSA in a timely manner alongside all of their other peers when they are in a different situation with their contributor or their parent or guardian. Yeah, so that is what I would say for some improvements and some challenges.
Yeah. Mainhia, same question to you. Things you've seen that have been a good improvement and challenges that you're facing from your seat.
Yeah, so for improvements, it's not something that we've seen just quite yet, but I do feel like we'll see this a little bit more once financial aid offers go out. But the expansion of Pell that Megan referred to, and just Pell being available to more students now because it's now linked to family size and federal poverty level. I'm excited for that because that means more financial aid for more students. And some of the challenges definitely just related to timeline and not being able to get financial aid offers out for our students who are really, really wondering how much college is going to cost them. We can give them as much scholarship, institutional scholarship information, but really they're waiting for that full financial aid offer and their full out-of-pocket costs. So that's been challenging, but I feel like schools have been doing a really good job in accommodating for these students, whether it be moving deposit deadlines to later in the summer, or even having more financial aid events. St. Kate's has moved our decision deadline to June 1st. We've also moved our housing deadline as well, just to give a little bit more time for students to really decide on which college they want to attend. And it has been hard for some of our students whose parents don't have social security numbers to complete the FAFSA and have their parents sign as contributors. But Department of Ed also announced recently that they've fixed some of those issues. So I'm excited to see more students complete the FAFSA soon.
Yes, thank you. And we're very thankful for those deadline adjustments in our world. And then back to you, Megan, anything you'd add from your seat as far as improvements or challenges? I think you spoke to them a little bit. And then maybe after that, if you would explain to us just what, if any, implications there are for Minnesota's state aid.
Yeah, definitely. So improvements for the students and families, as the other panelists alluded to, when it works very well. And I've even had families or students say, like, I think I did it wrong because it didn't take long enough, or it was too easy. Are you sure I did it right? Because one piece is that, which is a good thing, right? The Internal Revenue Service has some of the highest standards for data privacy anywhere. And so they don't even display on the screen to the student or parent what they're pulling over. And it's very secure and very protected once it gets to the college or university, as well as to the state financial aid agencies. And so I think a positive is it's so quick that really you're kind of just putting in a little bit of demographic info. Once you renew it next year for returning filers, you've created your federal student aid ID, your account, your studentaid.gov account. It knows who you are. You're really just saying, like, no, my address hasn't changed. My email's still the same. It's very quick in that aspect. We have seen that families have better success if the student initiates and then invites their contributor or their parent or spouse. And so definitely some things there that are quicker. So I think that would definitely be the other positive. Also highlighting the fact that Pell is expanded nationally to many more students and opening up opportunities. I think also, for someone who works in this industry, whenever the whole country is talking about FAFSA, it feels kind of lovely because it raises awareness, right? So more students and families are hearing there are resources available, and these resources available for you to go to college, and they're designed for you to help you alleviate some of those price tag or sticker shocks, and knowing that there are a lot of financial aid dollars out there. So I think the raising of awareness. Challenges, there's a lot of, it's new, and anything new or different is just kind of hard, right? Like humans, we're not wired for change naturally. So I think for folks who work in the industry, it's a challenge to learn those new terms, to learn the new eligibility criteria. For students and families, these delays cause anxiety and they cause stress, and that's not good for anybody, right? So I think, I just want to reiterate to the students and the families that we definitely do live in one of the best states for financial aid with the kinds of financial aid dollars we have, but also the professionals who work at our colleges and universities and in our college access programs are really dedicated. They're very passionate about the work they do. And I saw just folks in our state rise to challenges I'd never thought we'd have to navigate during the pandemic. And I see a lot of those same groups and those same professionals doing this again, where we unfortunately had to figure out how to navigate new, different, uncharted waters. And we did that very well overall. And we're continuing to do that. We're all looking for an easy year though, right? We're all still waiting for that. As far as impacts on state aid, this was actually a pretty good opportunity for us as a state. And it came at a point in time when our state was fortunate to have a positive spending balance in our kind of state coffers. And so there were some additional resources that could be reallocated to higher education. And so we worked very hard at the Office of Higher Ed to align our state financial aid program with some of these federal changes. And so some technical things like language in the law at the state level, matching the language in the federal changes, right? So that's kind of nothing super fun to talk about, but we did also take the opportunity to better align our the federal Pell Grant new information with our primary state financial aid program called the Minnesota State Grant. And so the deadline in the past for the state grant had been, you have to have your application, either the FAFSA or the DREAM Act, filed by the 30th day of the term. Whereas the Pell Grant, it was the last day of the fiscal year, or June 30th every year. We changed our state law last year to match that Pell deadline. Now, obviously, we don't want anyone filing the FAFSA that far into the term. You really want to know how you pay before the term starts, but it did give us some opportunities to better align it. We also moved our program to, instead of being 4 years of college attendance, to 6 years receipt of the actual state grant award, which is what the Pell Grant is. So we're kind of better aligning our primary state program with the primary federal program of gift aid. We also did have some really great historic investments in direct admissions, which hopefully some of you have heard about, as well as our new North Star Promise program. And then we did some other adjustments within that state grant program just to really conform with the fact that now that the measuring of a student can go into a negative number. So for the Minnesota State Grant, we acknowledge that in our state law and are actually giving a higher state grant award for a student who has a negative measurement of their family's ability to pay versus if they have a 0. And so that was just quite a few kind of technical changes, but those technical changes will create more aid dollars for students coming from the Minnesota State Office of Higher Education, as well as expanding opportunities for students.
Thank you so much for that. I think, what I hear from that and what I want to make sure that audience members hear is that the aid is there for you. It's there for you for multiple years. Even if you don't know all the ins and outs right now, like, please complete that application as timely as you can. And then find folks like the people on this panel who can answer additional questions. Hana, I'm going to go back to you. You've been giving a lot of pieces of advice to students and families as they've been working on this Better FAFSA so far this year. Give us a little bit of insight into what some of those common pieces of advice have been.
Yeah, so if a student is filling out a FAFSA, we say make those FSA IDs early. So the FSA ID is like the username and password for you to access your FAFSA application. And those have to get verified. It says 3 to 5 days. It's sometimes been a little bit sooner. Sometimes it's a little bit longer. But in order to officially start that FAFSA, you need to make that FSA ID. So make that now, so then you can wait a little bit, so then you can do your FAFSA in about a week or so. When you make your FSA ID, it is connected to your social security number, which then you also have to make sure your name is spelled correctly. And people might laugh at that. They might be like, I know how to spell my name. I know how to spell my mom's name, or I know my birthday or my parents' birthday. And one of the biggest mistakes we see are students not spelling their name correctly or their parents' name or birthdays correctly. So go slow. It is something you want to make sure you are doing accurately and correctly. And so by having all of those things spelled correctly and dates be correct, you want to make sure that it all kind of will then fall into place as you are filling out the actual application. So go slow, make sure everything is correct, and then also ask for help. It is so complicated sometimes, and it can feel really like an unknown mystery. Just like how Caitlyn was saying in her intro of just are we doing this right? Are we not? And so ask for help. If you ever come to a question where you're like, I don't know if this is how you're supposed to answer it, just pause and find someone who is an expert, like a career and college coordinator at your school or a financial aid or admissions person at a college, because that's what we're here for. We love to solve those mysteries and to support students and families along the way. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. And then back to you, Mainhia, advice on your end that you have been sharing with either prospective or current students. I'm sure that you get quite a bit of both students and families, and how are you helping them kind of navigate the stress and unknowns of this FAFSA cycle?
Yeah, well, I would say the first thing is to just stay calm. Like everyone's in the same boat. Up until like last week, no school was getting FAFSA information, so everyone's in the same boat. But we are definitely accommodating to students. For example, like I mentioned, the changes into tuition deposit deadlines, housing deadlines. Some schools even have alternative ways to get financial aid estimates out. So for example, St. Kate's, we have a net price calculator that you can fill out to get an estimate right now. Another piece of advice, we have seen FAFSA filing down a little bit. And so getting those FAFSAs done as soon as you can. We know that FAFSA information is sent on an applicant basis, not a school basis. So the earlier students complete and get their FAFSAs processed, the earlier schools will receive their information. So getting those done as soon as possible. Right now, it's also a really good time to look for outside scholarships and plan ahead. So if you're thinking about getting a summer job, looking for those, schools already have their cost of attendance and direct costs available. So you are able to see how much it will cost without financial aid. So just planning ahead. And then I guess my last piece of advice is to just stay connected with your admission counselor for whatever school you're interested in. They're really there to advocate for you and help you through the whole process. And make sure you know of all the deadlines that the school has. And visiting campus. That's like, while we're waiting, might as well go see the schools that you're interested in to get a better feel of, whether that school is a good fit for you. I'm super excited that Department of Ed has started sending FAFSAs to schools now. So in the meantime, yeah, just kind of getting all the other ducks in a row so that when you get your offer, you're really able to sit down and go through that.
Yeah, you're about to get real busy on campus with all of that processing. So we'll send you all of the good vibes. Just a reminder to the audience, pop open that Q&A. We've got a few questions in there, but we're going to have time to answer a couple of those. So we'll give you another minute or so to submit those. But before we answer a couple of those, kind of one last unscripted question to each of you. When you think about yourself a year from now, what do you hope you can say about the FAFSA and seeing that process kind of come back into a normalized space? What are you looking forward to a year from now?
I can go next, or first. I am definitely looking forward to like a typical financial aid timeline, but then with this like very easy tool that will make getting financial aid just very like quick and easy for all students and families who choose to go to college in the following year. It really truly is a much faster application. It really truly is just an easier application to like navigate and read. And so I think once we're in kind of like that regular sort of like normal timeline, it will be phenomenal for all of our students who are choosing to go to college to fill out. And I truly do believe it will make it easier to get that free money.
Yeah, something I'm really excited about for next year is that hopefully there's more students or less students actually that have to complete verification. Now with like tax information being directly transferred from the IRS, hopefully there will be fewer students who have to submit tax documents and other like documents needed for FAFSA verification. And so more students are able to like not have to focus on that so much in the summertime before school starts.
That's a really good flag, Mainhia. Can you say a little bit more? I don't think we used verification as one of our buzzwords yet today. Can you just say a little bit more about what that is for folks who might not be familiar?
Yeah, absolutely. So students, some students, and it Some students are randomly selected for verification, and it doesn't mean that they've done anything wrong in filling out the FAFSA. It just means that schools have to verify specific pieces of information. So usually it's like income, or it could be like in the past, it's been like household size. It could be identity as well. So there's a wide variety of things. But for the most part, if your information was transferred directly from the IRS, we don't have to verify that information because we know that information is accurate. So it usually, if students don't complete verification, it will hold up the disbursement of financial aid funds. And so, let's say you forget to do verification and school starts, your financial aid won't be applied until you get verification completed. So that's definitely been a holdup for some of our students who have had issues getting like tax documents for parents or for themselves. But hopefully next year, that's something that we won't have to worry about too much.
Thank you. Megan, what are you looking forward to a year from now?
I think, piggybacking on the more normal cycle, just giving families and students more time to be able to have conversations and feel supported in their decisions and their ability to navigate options. There definitely still is that time in this cycle, and you can tell by the enthusiasm on this call, there are a lot of passionate folks who work in this industry who want to help and are excited to talk about those opportunities. But I'm excited for when things are on a more regular calendar and we can really talk about some of these historic investments our state has made into some additional and new state financial aid resources for Minnesotans who go to Minnesota institutions. And they're really very, very significant and important investments. And so I'm looking forward to less having to talk about technical things and usernames and passwords and data verification and how it's supposed to work, and really focus on what's available to help you go to school and how do you help figure out which school might be a good fit and what kind of program are you looking at and what are the occupational outlooks in our state for that job, and just kind of some of that more the funner sides of working in higher education that I think a lot of us enjoy when the technology just happens a little bit more seamlessly in a timelier way. I do want to emphasize, though, it's definitely not too late, and really piggyback on Mainhia's comment. Every single school in the entire country, every student and family is in the same situation. So nobody's behind, nobody's missed out. There is still time and resources to make going to college this coming fall a reality.
Yes, thank you. Such a good point. So there's a couple of questions in the chat here that I think are actually pretty related to each other. And I think first I'll turn it back to you, Megan, but I think Hana and Mainhia, you can also speak to this from your lens as well. Folks are wondering what circumstances does a student not need to identify a parent or contributor's income on the FAFSA? And a related question is wondering if it's become easier for students who might be estranged from their families, for example, in that particular case.
Yeah, I can speak to that. That's a great question. So when you start navigating through the FAFSA, the first section talks about personal circumstances. And so things that make someone what's considered dependent or independent on the FAFSA are different than what makes someone dependent or independent for tax filing purposes. So for the FAFSA, they're looking at if the student is currently serving on active duty forces, if they're a veteran, if they have children or other people who live with them and receive more than half of their support from the student. If the student at any time since they turned age 13 was either an orphan or has no living biological or adoptive parent. If at any time since turning 13 they were a ward of the court or they were in foster care, or they were legally emancipated, and then a student who was in legal guardianship with someone other than their parent or step-parent. Any of those cases, as well as their age, could make them what's called an independent student, and then they would not need to supply another contributor, so their parent information. What's changed is that in addition to those personal circumstances, there's a question prompted about what's called students' other circumstances. And this is talking about a student who has been unaccompanied and either they were homeless or they were self-supporting and at risk of being homeless. And so this question is being asked, I think, probably with better wording than it has been in the past. And it's also something where once you get into that student unusual circumstance, it asks another question aside from that risk of homelessness, where, it starts to ask a little bit more about maybe is there a student who has a situation where, contacting their parent would pose a risk to the student. So some of those, and they give really good examples of like maybe a student who has an unusual circumstance would be someone who's left home due to an abusive or threatening environment, who's been abandoned or estranged from their parents. If they are, a refugee or asylee status and they're separated from their parents, or their parent is displaced in outside of the United States, if they're a victim of human trafficking, or, if they can't contact their parents because their parents are incarcerated, or just for some other reason, they just can't contact their parent. So I think that the FAFSA form gives better examples of those. And so that a student could indicate earlier on that maybe I should be considered an independent student and not add contributor information. The student then becomes what's called provisionally independent, where the FAFSA will let them continue processing the form without adding parent info, but they likely will get some sort of follow-up from their school just to document what's going on in this situation, which isn't meant to be intrusive. It's meant to, one, document it, and then two, talk about what other supports are at the campus level to help that student and really get more services and wrap around and connect them with resources. The one great thing about these FAFSA changes is once it's kind of established that student's first year, the student doesn't have to every year then reapply and kind of show documentation that will carry through for the future years of the student's academic career at that same school.
Thank you so much. That was really thorough and helpful. We got another great question from a parent. I think any of you can answer this, but it might default to Megan. Whoever wants to jump in is welcome to. But they ask, as a parent, should I be able to access my child's submitted FAFSA form? When I log in from my own account, it's not coming up. Are the student and parents' accounts linked somehow?
That I might actually have to pass to Hana because I haven't been doing as many FAFSAs as you all probably have.
I can definitely take that one on. So part of the better FAFSA is that it really is putting the onus on the student. So the student is the one who is filling out their information. They have their separate application that they then invite a contributor or their parent or guardian to. And so actually the student and the contributors don't ever actually see each other's portions of the application. So when a parent finishes their side of the FAFSA and a student finishes their side of the FAFSA, it is actually the student and only the student who will receive then an email from the U.S. Department of Education with kind of like the receipt of what is being submitted. So it will say like you completed your FAFSA. It'll have the student aid index. So that SAI, which is a negative 1,500 is the lowest number. And then like any sort of next steps, but it is only the student who will receive that because it is the student's FAFSA. I personally have not seen any parents, like if they log in on their side, if they can see the student side. I don't think that's the case. I believe it is only the student. So the student has to share that email and that SAI for the family.
Thank you, Hana. All right, we have another really good question that came in that I think any one of you would be able to answer. So whoever jumps at it first. So this attendee shares that they've been reading in the news that there are errors with aid eligibility calculations and Pell Grant eligibility. My student received an email saying they do not qualify for the Pell Grant. Based on what I know about Pell Grant eligibility, this was expanded. Can you speak to when we might have a better idea of what our students' aid index is and what grants they are eligible for?
I can address that one. So again, to kind of summarize what the student aid index is, there is a formula approved by Congress that mathematically calculates a family's ability to pay for college. This has always been true since the FAFSA was created. It's really meant to universally measure everyone the same way. Look at, how many people are in the family? What is the income? What are the assets? How close are the parent or parents to retirement? Where do they live? What are the taxes in the place they live? All these different kind of variables. And then income protections and asset protections. And with that formula, they have updated it recently as the beginning of this month. So there were some initial formulas shared, and then later they realized there was an error and that they had not updated some tables, and those tables were related to inflation. And as many of us know, inflation was pretty high these last couple of years. So the fact that they said, we messed up, we're going to fix this, was actually a good thing. They went back and adjusted to include that higher inflation, which actually made more students eligible for Pell Grants and more accurately reflected more families as needing more assistance. So that's maybe some of the news that you were hearing as far as the messages for Pell Grant. I do know there were some students, for example, who already have a baccalaureate degree, so they're not eligible for a Pell Grant, but they got that message saying your student aid index is in the range where you'll get a Pell, but they won't get one. So that unfortunately has been going on. I think the new most recent guidance would be the ICERs just this week started getting, the FAFSAs just started getting processed this week nationally. The state of Minnesota, we received less than 10. We're testing them, making sure they come into our system okay. Some schools in Minnesota have also started to receive single-digit numbers, and that's really just to make sure there aren't any issues. And then the Federal Student Aid Center is going to slowly kind of open that faucet and have more come out, and we should be all caught up within 2 weeks. When that ICER, the FAFSA is sent to the school and sent to the state agency, the student will get what's called their FAFSA submission summary. And that FAFSA submission summary is kind of the official, this is the processed FAFSA for you, a student, to look at. And so it's important that the student's checking their email for those who've already filed the FAFSA. Now, again, once this kind of 2-week period is over, it should be more real time. Within 3 to 5 days after you file the FAFSA, you'll get that message and everything would be real and accurate and closer to real time.
Thank you so much. Awesome. Okay, so we are going to conclude our panelists with if there's any last minute words of wisdom that you would like to share. You already shared so much with us, but if there's anything else that you want to make sure that our audience hears before I turn it back over to Danielle. Do the FAFSA. I think if you're a senior is probably one of them, right? And if you're a junior, get ready.
Do the FAFSA, apply for scholarships. This is the time, do it.
I apologize. I was just typing into the chat. I forgot to mention the FAFSA submission summary does include that student aid index. So that's another way. And I believe once it's been processed, the student can go back into my account and they can pull that up and see it within their studentaid.gov account. So parting word messages, I think that was the catch-all, right?
You got it.
So I just want to put in a little tiny plug for our new North Star Promise program, which is a tuition and fee-free way for any Minnesota resident who has a less than $80,000 adjusted gross income to have tuition and fees fully covered by any aid sources that aren't already covered it. So kind of filling that gap for any Pell Grant or state grant. And that's for any Minnesota public institution. So all of the Minnesota state colleges and universities, all of the University of Minnesota campuses, as well as our 3 tribal colleges. And so that's something we're new and excited about. It starts this fall of 2024. So we're really excited to start to see some students and families take advantage of that new program.
And one more thing to add, universities and colleges are still open to accommodating for any special circumstances that may arise too. So like, for example, if you had a parent who unfortunately lost their job in 2020, or 2023, definitely reach out to your financial aid office. Many schools have forms that you can fill out to for you to use your family's income information that accurately reflects their current information. So
Awesome. So many thanks to each of you, and I'll turn it back over to Danielle to get us wrapped up.
Thanks, Caitlin. I want to just first echo Caitlyn's thanks to our panelists for being here today. You are all so busy, and especially at this particular time. So we appreciate you being here so much. Thank you for taking the time with us today. We also wanted to be sure that everyone leaves this event today with some resources to take home with you. So note that all of this information I'm about to share will be sent to you via email. So if you do not catch it now, know that it's going to be in your inbox shortly if you were registered. So first, if you're a parent, guardian, or caretaker of a student attending one of the 28 Minneapolis or St. Paul public high schools supported by Achieve Twin Cities, please encourage your student to visit us at our career and college centers. The QR code on the screen will take you right to our website where you can find a center at your school. We want to share links to both the Federal Student Aid website as well as the Office of Higher Education website, and those QR codes are on your screen as well. Please don't hesitate to follow up with Caitlyn Cole, today's event facilitator and the Director of Career and College Readiness at Achieve Twin Cities. If you have any additional questions about anything you've heard today, her contact information can be found on the screen. And lastly, we invite you to get more involved with Achieve Twin Cities. So visit our Get Engaged page to learn more about volunteering at our school career events, hiring a high school or college intern, attending one of our events, or making a financial donation to Achieve. You can also contact us directly at info@achievetwincities.org. You've been wonderful guests. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a wonderful day.